So like, I'm thankful for gray spaces because it lets you exist when you don't feel like you have a place. But I'm also thankful for these black and white areas and for these labels to give you rest when you're just burnt out from the gray space and exhausted from the gray space. So we were printing labels yesterday at my work. We do a bulk mailing a few times a year. It's a nonprofit where I work based here in Mexico. We ran out of labels. Nos fuimos por la finta with some boxes. That means we just went by appearances and got fooled. Saw these boxes of labels that seemed to be exactly the same. Turns out they were completely different labels. So we thought we had an abundance. We had a scarcity. Somebody went and picked up some more labels and put them on my desk of the right size, 1 inch by 4 inch. That's the kind we were using. And I look at them and I can tell that something is off immediately. Even though on the box it says 1 inch by 4 inch labels, it turns out that they're not actually 1 inch tall. They are 4 inches wide perfectly, but it's like just slightly less than 1 inch tall. If we were to print one of these sheets, more than half the labels would be completely useless. So like, I'm looking at this, and the software we use to organize it is Microsoft Word, and it has like every label known to mankind in there. And so I was like, okay, I'll just put in this labels, thing, and it wasn't there. I don't know if it's like if I would need the Mexican version of Microsoft Word, or if this type of label just doesn't exist, or if they're like miscut. I don't know. For whatever reason, Office Depot 1 inch by 4 inch labels here in Mexico are not actually 1 inch tall, and the template doesn't exist in Microsoft Word. So I had to spend like 2 hours trying to figure out how to get this stinking print onto these labels. And that sums up pretty well what the last 8 years of my life have been like. Oh my goodness, just living in this sort of gray area where there aren't really like categories for what you have, and things that should work don't quite work. I don't know if you can relate. Have you ever had something like that where like, by all accounts it should work? It's like, yes, this says it's 1 inch by 4 inch, but it just doesn't work. It just doesn't play out like you had hoped or like it should. That happens to me a lot. I just have a lot of like weird cases, like things where I don't quite fit into the right categories. For a long time, I was like between tourist and resident. I like was doing work, but couldn't do freelance work. It was just weird gray areas all the time. Even when I got married, like, usually when a Mexican and American get married, it's like, oh yeah, they're gonna go live in the States and they're gonna get their green card and this and that. But like, no, we're getting married and we want to live in Mexico. And they like didn't have a category for that. And it just like the whole protocol is super weird. Paying taxes, my gosh, paying taxes. Like, okay, so like living in Mexico, getting non-employee compensation from a nonprofit that's based in the United States, and being married to a Mexican. So like married, filing separately for someone who doesn't have income in the States, it's a nightmare. And there are no categories for it. Like, it's just ridiculous. Anyway, I've been living in this the last 8 years, but really, the more I think about it, the more I realize I have been like defying categories since the get-go. Like, for example, I'm a lefty, but not really. Like, I'm a lefty with some things. I write with my left hand, and I brush my teeth, and I eat with my left hand. But I throw frisbee and throw a ball with my right hand, and I kick with my right foot, and I snowboard regular, and like I don't know, like I'm not a lefty in everything, but I'm not ambidextrous either. Like, I can't do everything with both hands. Like, I can only do some things with one hand and some things with the other. It just doesn't make sense. Like, is there a category for that? Somebody said flexidextrous one time, but I don't even know if that's a real thing. So I defy categories. Growing up, I rollerbladed, and you can't say rollerblading because that's a brand name. So, like aggressive inline, but that's just dumb. And so, like, I'm a blader. I skate, but you can't say skating because skateboarders already have that. There's just like, there's not even a word for it. And then I get to high school and I start playing sports and I'm playing Ultimate Frisbee. Frisbee's a brand name, and so you just call it Ultimate, but you say Ultimate and nobody knows what you're talking about. You see what I mean? Like, I just have been defying these categories for so long, and it's just become a part of my brand, I guess. Personality tests. First time I ever took the Myers-Briggs, I read the results and I was like, that's not right. Second and third time I took the Myers-Briggs also, it was just like, this doesn't quite, it felt more like a horoscope. The Enneagram, I was like, oh yeah, I am very much a 9. I'm also very much a 5. And they're like, well, you can't actually be both numbers. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't want to be defying these things all the time, but I'm thankful for these gray spaces sometimes, because it means that not everything is black and white. And there are times when like people want to force your hand and tell you that some certain things are black and white, but you know that just isn't the case for you. I think there are people who are very comfortable with black and white, but not even wanting to, not intending to, just inhabit gray areas more. It's also pretty tiring living in those gray areas with sort of the uncertainty of, like, am I doing things right? Am I doing things wrong? Is this okay? I'm thankful for the gray areas because I think there are a lot of people who can identify with just not fitting the categories. And even so I'm thinking about my daughter who was born in Mexico but is an American citizen, is going to be learning English and Spanish, and just how strange that space is going to be for her, And so for that reason, I'm thankful that gray spaces exist, because I think, there are going to be a lot of times where she's not going to know who to identify with, and I think more and more people are accepting those gray spaces and saying these tags or these labels don't necessarily apply as much as they did anymore. But on the other hand, I'm thankful for certain labels or certain things that are black and white that give you rest. And I think that's something that's really interesting because, like I said, gray spaces have been my brand unintentionally for most of my life, but it's just it's easier just to say, yeah, I'm a lefty. It's restful instead of having to explain everything. And so when people ask me what I do now, I just yeah, I make videos, and that's not everything that I do. I do so much more. My communication job is all over the map, so many different responsibilities, wearing so many different hats, and I do photography, but what I'm passionate about, what I like doing, and what I can finally do now that I'm a permanent resident and have done all the tax stuff in Mexico and can work legally here, yes, I am a freelance videographer in addition to my regular communications job, but I am a freelance videographer, and just to say that makes things easier to have that label. I don't know if this is making any sense. So I'm thankful for gray spaces because it lets you exist when you don't feel like you have a place. But I'm also thankful for these black and white areas and for these labels to give you rest when you're just burnt out from the gray space and exhausted from the gray space. So I'm thankful for both of those. Does that make sense? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious if this is just some raving lunatic, if this is me being a raving lunatic, or if that actually is resonating with any of you. But for those of you who feel like you don't quite fit into the categories, it's okay to be in the gray space, or you can take on labels that are only partially accurate and just be okay with that. Say yes, I am this, even though that doesn't define you. If that will help other people wrap their brains around who you are, then go for it. And if you eventually are in that gray space long enough, I think what happens is that you come out sort of on the other side of that and end up with a clearer sense of who you are and a clearer sense of what labels do apply to you. Maybe that's why old people are so like black and white minded. No, I don't think that's fair. I think there are plenty of gray old people. Pun intended, of course. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.